Bro, you're still driving this thing? I thought you'd have it towed by now. My cousin Derek's voice cut through the summer air like a knife as I pulled into my grandmother's driveway, and I watched his face twist into that familiar smirk I'd known since childhood. He was leaning against his brand new Mercedes AMG, arms crossed, designer sunglasses pushed up on his forehead like a crown. But what Derek didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that the embarrassing rust bucket he was laughing at was about to teach him the most expensive lesson of his life. Let me paint you the full picture. It was the 4th of July, and my grandmother's house in suburban Connecticut was the gathering point for our annual family reunion. Cars lined the circular driveway and spilled out onto the street, BMWs, Lexuses, a couple of Teslas, and Derek's gleaming black Mercedes that he'd been posting about on Instagram for the past 3 months straight. And then there was me, pulling up in my 2009 Honda Accord with 247,000 miles on the odometer. The paint had faded from its original deep blue to something closer to a dusty gray. There was a small dent on the rear bumper from a shopping cart incident I'd never bothered to fix. The interior was clean but worn, the leather cracked in places, the steering wheel smooth from years of use. To anyone looking at it, to Derek, especially, it screamed one thing: failure. I parked at the end of the driveway, far from the German engineering showcase, and took my time getting out. I knew what was coming. It happened every year. Seriously, Marcus, this is getting sad. Derek pushed off his Mercedes and walked toward me, his designer sneakers crunching on the gravel. What is that, like 15 years old now? You know they make new cars, right? Like, they didn't stop production. He laughed at his own joke, loud enough for our Uncle Robert and cousin Tamara to hear from the porch. They exchanged glances but said nothing. They never did. 17 years, actually, I said, closing my door with the same careful motion I'd used for over a decade. Runs great. Runs great. Derek repeated my words mockingly, shaking his head. Man, I couldn't imagine. I literally couldn't imagine showing up anywhere in something like that. Don't you get embarrassed? Like, what do girls think when they see you pull up in this? I just smiled and grabbed the bowl of potato salad I'd brought from the passenger seat. Happy 4th of July to you too, Derek. The thing about Derek is that he's not a bad person. Not really. He's just been conditioned, like so many people, to measure success in very specific ways. Square footage. Brand names. Horsepower. Instagram likes. He climbed the corporate ladder at a pharmaceutical company, and he made sure everyone knew it. Every family gathering was an opportunity to casually mention his salary, his bonus structure, his company car, his condo in Stamford with the rooftop pool. And every family gathering, without fail, he'd find a way to comment on my car. I'm just saying, Marcus, he continued, following me toward the house, you've got that tech job, right? Software something? Those guys make decent money. There's no reason you should still be driving something that belongs in a junkyard. It's like you're not even trying. Maybe I like it, I said. Nobody likes driving a 17-year-old Honda. Come on. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and turned to face him. Behind me, I could hear the sounds of family inside, kids running, my aunt's laughter, the sizzle of something on the grill. In front of me, Derek stood with his hands in his pockets, genuinely convinced he was offering me helpful life advice. Derek, I said calmly, has it ever occurred to you that maybe I have different priorities? He laughed again. Priorities? What priorities? Living like you're broke? I didn't answer. I just walked inside, set my potato salad on the kitchen counter, and hugged my grandmother, who told me I looked thin and immediately started loading a plate for me. For the next 2 hours, the gathering unfolded the way it always did. Kids played in the backyard. The older generation argued about politics in the living room. The grill masters debated charcoal versus propane like it was a matter of national security. And Derek held court on the back deck, entertaining anyone who would listen with stories about his recent trip to Miami, his new watch, and his plans to upgrade to an even bigger Mercedes next year. Got my eye on the S-Class, I heard him telling my cousin Brittany. The one I have now is nice, but I'm ready for the next level, you know? You've got to keep moving up. That's how you show the world you're winning. I was sitting in a lawn chair nearby, half listening while scrolling through my phone. My grandmother's backyard was beautiful, big oak trees, a garden she'd been tending for 40 years, string lights my uncle had hung for the occasion. It was peaceful. And for a while, I thought maybe Derek had said everything he needed to say about my car. I was wrong. Hey Marcus, he called out, loud enough for the whole deck to hear. Quick question. When's the last time you got a new car? Like, actually drove something off a lot? I looked up from my phone. At least 8 family members were now watching, drinks in hand, waiting for my response. Never, I said simply. Derek's eyes went wide with theatrical disbelief. Never? You've never bought a new car? I bought this one used in 2012 for $8,000. It's been paid off ever since. $8,000. Derek repeated the number like it was a disease. My watch costs more than that. A few people laughed nervously. My Aunt Patricia, Derek's mother, looked uncomfortable but didn't intervene. She never did. Marcus, seriously, I'm asking his family here. Derek walked closer, adopting a tone of fake concern. Are you okay? Like, financially? Because if things are tight, there are resources. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this, he gestured vaguely toward the driveway, toward my invisible Honda, this isn't normal. This is like, struggling behavior. And you're what, 34? 35? 36, I said. 36. Okay, 36 years old, and you're driving something that should have been scrapped during the Obama administration. That's not a flex, man. That's a cry for help. The deck had gone quiet. Even the kids in the backyard seemed to have paused their game. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, some sympathetic, some curious, some silently agreeing with Derek. And here's the thing. I could have let it go. I could have done what I always did, shrugged, changed the subject, waited for the attention to drift elsewhere. I'd been doing that for years. Letting Derek have his moment, letting him feel superior, because I knew something he didn't. But something about this time was different. Maybe it was the way he'd said, cry for help. Maybe it was the fact that he'd embarrassed me in front of people I loved. Maybe I was just tired. Whatever the reason, I made a decision. Derek, I said, setting my phone face down on my knee, what's your net worth? The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. What? Your net worth. All your assets minus all your debts. What's the number? He laughed, but it was defensive now. Why would I tell you that? Because you seem really interested in my financial situation. So I figured we could compare notes. I mean, he looked around at our family members, suddenly less comfortable being the center of attention. That's kind of personal, don't you think? More personal than publicly asking if I'm struggling financially? More personal than calling my life a cry for help? Derek's jaw tightened. Fine. You want to do this? Okay. I make $230,000 a year, plus bonuses. My condo is worth $600,000. My car is worth $90,000. I've got investments. I've got a 401k. I'm doing very, very well, Marcus. Can you say the same? The deck was absolutely silent now. I took a slow breath and picked up my phone. Can I show you something? Sure, he said, crossing his arms. Show me your savings account. I could use a laugh. I opened my portfolio app, the one I checked maybe once a month, the one I'd been quietly building for the past 14 years. Then I stood up, walked over to Derek, and turned the screen toward him. His face changed. It went through stages, like watching time-lapse photography of a flower wilting. First there was the smirk, still lingering from his bravado. Then confusion, his eyebrows drawing together. Then his lips parted slightly as the numbers registered. Then the color drained from his cheeks. That's... He started, then stopped. That can't be right. It's right. But that's... Marcus, that's... 2.4 million, I said calmly. Give or take, depending on the market. Someone on the deck gasped. I think it was Brittany. Derek grabbed my phone, staring at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. His eyes darted across the numbers, the total balance, the account breakdown, the holdings, the growth chart that climbed steadily upward over more than a decade. This is fake, he said, but his voice had no conviction. This has to be fake. You're a software developer. You drive a Honda. He looked at my outfit, you wear plain t-shirts from Target. Old Navy, actually. They were on sale. This doesn't make sense. I gently took my phone back. It makes perfect sense, Derek. It's just not the kind of sense you've been taught to recognize. My grandmother had come out onto the deck at some point, drawn by the commotion. She was watching with sharp eyes, the way she always did, seeing everything and saying nothing. Let me explain something, I said, addressing not just Derek but everyone who was watching. That Honda in the driveway? I bought it for $8,000 when I was 22 years old. It was already 6 years old then. I've spent maybe $4,000 on maintenance over the past 14 years. That's $12,000 total for reliable transportation for nearly a decade and a half. I pulled up a calculator on my phone. Derek, you said your car is worth $90,000. What are your monthly payments? He hesitated. $1,400. And before this one? What were you driving? A BMW X5. Payments? About the same. Maybe $1,100. And before that? He was silent. I'm going to estimate that over the past 14 years, you've spent somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000 on car payments, insurance premiums for new vehicles, and depreciation losses. Does that sound about right? Derek didn't answer, but the math was doing the talking for him. That money, I continued, the money I didn't spend on cars? It went into index funds. Month after month, year after year. While you were upgrading your ride every 3 years, I was buying shares of the total stock market. While you were making payments, I was making investments. I showed him the growth chart again, the beautiful, jagged, ultimately upward line that represented 14 years of patience. The first 100,000 took me almost 6 years, I said. The second 100,000 took 3. The third took less than 2. And now? Now my money makes more money in a good month than I used to make in a year at my first job. That's compound interest. That's time in the market. That's the thing they don't teach you when they reselling you a luxury car with a 5-year loan. Derek was staring at the ground now. The Mercedes key fob was visible in his pocket, suddenly looking less like a status symbol and more like an anchor. But here's what I want you to understand, I said, and my voice softened. I'm not telling you this to embarrass you. I'm telling you because you've spent years embarrassing me, and I think you deserve to know why it never actually bothered me. I sat back down in my lawn chair. When you pulled up in your new Mercedes and I pulled up in my old Honda, you saw failure and success. You saw someone struggling and someone winning. But what you didn't see was that my car is paid off, my condo is paid off, my student loans were paid off 8 years ago, and I could retire tomorrow if I wanted to. Not in luxury, not yet, but comfortably. Completely free. I let that sink in. Your Mercedes is beautiful, Derek. It really is. But it's also a depreciating asset attached to a monthly payment, attached to an insurance premium, attached to a lifestyle that requires you to keep working whether you want to or not. You're not driving that car is driving you. For the first time in my life, Derek had absolutely nothing to say. My Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Marcus, I had no idea. You never said anything. What was there to say? Hey everyone, I have money? That's not really my style. But all these years, letting Derek. Brittany trailed off, glancing at her cousin. Letting Derek be Derek? I shrugged. His opinions about my car didn't change my portfolio balance. And honestly, every time he made a comment, it just reminded me why I made the choices I made. My grandmother finally spoke. Marcus always was the quiet one, she said, and there was pride in her voice. Even as a boy. While the other kids were showing off their toys, he was saving his allowance. I used to wonder if it would pay off. She looked at me with those knowing eyes. I guess it did. The rest of the evening was different. Not awkward exactly, but shifted. Derek stayed quiet, nursing the same beer for 2 hours. A few family members pulled me aside to ask questions, real questions, about index funds and compound interest and how to get started. My Aunt Patricia apologized for Derek, which she'd never done before. And when it was time to leave, Derek caught me in the driveway. Hey, he said. His voice was stripped of its usual bravado. Can I ask you something? Sure. If you have all that money, why do you still drive this car? Like, genuinely. You could buy any car you want. I ran my hand along the faded hood of my Honda, feeling the familiar contours. A few reasons, I said. First, it still runs perfectly. Gets me everywhere I need to go. Second, every month I don't have a car payment is another month of investment contributions. Third, and this is the real reason, this car reminds me of who I am. Derek frowned. What do you mean? I mean that 15 years ago, I made a decision about what kind of life I wanted to build. Not a life that looks impressive to other people, but a life that actually is impressive when you look under the hood. This car is a symbol of that decision. Every time I drive it, I remember that I chose freedom over appearances. I chose patience over instant gratification. I chose my future self over my present ego. I opened the driver's door. And honestly? I love this car. It's been with me through everything. First job, first apartment, first date with my wife, bringing my daughter home from the hospital. It's not just transportation, it's 14 years of my life. Why would I trade that for something that's just newer? Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I never expected. Could you teach me? How you did it? I looked at my cousin, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see the arrogant guy with the designer sunglasses and the need to impress everyone. I saw someone who'd been running on a treadmill his whole life, chasing a version of success that would never let him rest. Yeah, I said. I can teach you. But it starts with being okay with people thinking you're broke. It starts with driving past the dealership when your friends are trading up. It starts with delayed gratification and boring investments and years, literally years, of watching your money grow so slowly you wonder if it's working. That sounds hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. But also the most important. Derek nodded slowly, something shifting behind his eyes. Okay. I'm in. I smiled and reached into my car, pulling out a book I kept in the center console, a worn copy of The Simple Path to Wealth that I'd read probably a dozen times. Start here, I said, handing it to him. And call me when you finish. We'll talk. He took the book like it was something precious. As I drove away, I watched Derek in my rearview mirror. He was standing in the driveway, illuminated by the string lights, holding that book and staring at his Mercedes with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. It looked like doubt. It looked like the beginning of something. The funny thing about wealth is that the real stuff, the life-changing stuff, is almost always invisible. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need validation. It just sits there, quietly growing, waiting for the moment when it matters. My cousin spent years taunting my old car because he thought he understood what success looked like. He thought success was shiny and new and expensive. He thought success was something you showed off. But real success? Real wealth? It's not the car in your driveway. It's the freedom to not care what anyone thinks about the car in your driveway. That 17-year-old Honda taught me more about money, discipline, and patience than any business school could. It taught me that every dollar has a choice. You can spend it trying to impress people, or you can invest it in your future. I chose my future. And now, 14 years later, my future is sitting in a portfolio that grows whether I'm working or sleeping, whether the economy is up or down, whether my cousin approves of my car or not. That's not poverty. That's not failure. That's not a cry for help. That's freedom. So the next time someone judges you for your old car, your modest apartment, your lack of designer labels, smile and keep going. You don't owe anyone an explanation. You don't need their approval. Just keep investing. Keep building. Keep choosing your future over other people's opinions. Because one day, when their bank accounts are empty and their leased cars are repossessed and their credit card bills come due, your quiet discipline will speak louder than any status symbol ever could. And trust me, that moment? It's worth the wait.